Okay. Our developing story, we've been waiting to hear from Mayor de Blasio about his meeting with Ben Carson, the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development,
Secretary
about
Carson,
problems at NYCHA. Let's listen.
I said the other day on the radio, want to affirm he has put a lot of time and energy into discussing how we can address the issues of the New York City Housing Authority. I want to thank him for that. We had a detailed discussion of the kinds of steps that we need to take going forward. We agreed that the negotiations toward a settlement would proceed immediately. I think it was constructive, hopeful conversations. We know there's a lot we have to get done, but there's a real acknowledgement from Secretary Carson that we made some big steps last week, announcing our plans around new investments in NYCHA, and obviously a very, very important labor deal. He was well-versed on all that and attentive to those important changes. So we agreed that we're going to stay in regular dialogue, he and I, that he obviously is going to stay in dialogue with the members of the Congress, and that our teams are going to get to work literally in the next 24 hours working on a settlement to get there ahead of the deadline that we have mutually agreed to for the end of January. So again, I think it's a step in the right direction, a lot of more work to do, big issues to face, but a step in the right direction. With that, I want to first turn to Congressmember Nydia Velázquez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So today was a very constructive, productive meeting, and we look forward, the New York congressional delegation, to help with an outcome that is constructive and positive for the people that we represent. We care deeply about the conditions of New York City housing residents, and we also have to understand how do we get to the point where we are today. And I reminded the Secretary that for too long, disinvestment from the federal government has taken place, as well as disinvestment from the state and city governments. And this is the time when we have to come together and share our responsibility to make sure that we return New York City Housing Authority to those years where we were the MD of the nation, the best well-run agency across this country. And we are looking forward to continue to work together to make sure that we bring in the resources, but also that we hold accountable the authorities within New York City Housing Authority. There must be top to bottom reforms that need to take place, transparency and accountability.
Amen. Amen. Congressmember Carolyn Maloney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for calling this meeting. Over 400,000 New Yorkers live in public housing. It has provided safe and affordable housing with playgrounds and parks around it, and we must preserve it. It is needed in New York. We in the New York delegation are going to work our hearts out to get more federal funding for NYCHA, for public housing, more federal support, and we are going to work to support the efforts of the mayor to modernize and really work hard to provide services to the people. I particularly applaud them for their SWAT team approach of sending in a team to make all of the repairs in one housing project at one time. I think it's innovative, and the people that live there are very appreciative, and so am I. But we are determined to be as helpful as possible with federal funding.
And Congressmember Gregory Meeks.
Thank you. I thought we had a fantastic meeting because the meeting was about making the lives of people who live in public housing better. I'm a product of public housing. I grew up in public housing. My parents were happy to move into public housing. And this meeting was about making sure that people who live in public housing live in a decent facility. We talked about the RAD program, of which I've witnessed myself, because in the 5th Congressional District at Ocean Bay, we've seen people's lives transformed by the work that this mayor has been doing to fight to get the funding for RAD. We've seen people whose homes, whose apartments have been transformed. in a public-private partnership that preserved the rights of the tenants, but made sure that they also are living in decent facilities and have the kind of opportunities that I had growing up in public housing. But especially what I enjoyed about this meeting, what I thought was important about this meeting, is that I watched with the dedication of the mayor of the city of New York, Mr. de Blasio, talk with passion about how he is focused on changing and moving forward to make life better. That he understands that he is going to be held accountable, and he asks for that accountability and says judge him by what he does. And I also was pleased by the secretary, seeing how he was working with and pleased with what the mayor was talking and how the mayor was talking about. So I saw a working relationship in the makings that has been working back and forth apparently for a little while now, how both the secretary of HUD and the mayor of the city of New York will be working together because they both know that accountability falls on their shoulders and they're ready to stand up to the challenges. And it's a challenge because we're all talking about decades of neglect. Not this administration, not just one, but decades of neglect by prior HUD secretaries and prior mayors. But these two individuals seem to show to me that they're ready to stand up and take the responsibility and move forward for the benefit of the people who live in public housing. It was a good meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll take some questions. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, same question, different day. Did the topic of receivership come up? What was said about receivership? Do you think that this is still a real possibility?
So, again, I will insist that to get Secretary Carson's point of view, you should ask Secretary Carson and his team. Of course, the topic came up, and I think there was a broad agreement that we're going to do all together to avert it, that both HUD and the City of New York believe there's a better way. And that better way is come to a settlement.
Why have your emails with
Hold on, everyone, hold on. We're talking about this meeting. Go ahead.
Indicate then that he is willing for the Trump administration to kick in a lot more federal money?
Look, I've been consistent, and my colleagues have been consistent. We believe there should be more money for NYCHA from the federal government. We've been very, very consistent about that fact. Let me finish. We believe that is part of really fixing the underlying problems, right? We've talked about that in every meeting. Again, I'll let Secretary Carson speak for himself. I still held out the hope because these good people be in the majority. Because Chuck Schumer is today the minority leader, and I think soon will be the majority leader, that day is coming when there's going to be additional federal resources. We've asked for it. I'll let Secretary Carson speak to his view of the matter.
Has Judge Pauley approved your request for the extension?
We have, to the best of my knowledge, not heard a formal response from Judge Pauley. This obviously went in late on Friday. But I think that the unity of the players is going to be important to Judge Pauley.
You mentioned that this was, and everyone talked about this being a productive meeting. What's changed since when you went in and now you've come out? What came of this meeting? What's the importance of it? Why are we out here having a press conference about it?
Because of 400,000 people's lives hang in the balance. That's why we're having a press conference.
That's different than we could have told them before this meeting.
David, respectfully, the topic could not be more important because it has to do with 400,000 people. The key decision makers are talking face to face about how to solve the problem. That's pretty damn important. The members of Congress are here to make sure that everything can be done to move this agreement along. When people are talking about agreement, that's a good thing, and specific steps that we need to take. There's going to be a detailed negotiation process. We talked about how that process should proceed. We affirmed the timeline. We affirmed who the players would be. This was very tangible stuff to keep us moving forward.
So
what's the settlement that you're envisioning?
Look, again, I'm obviously in a detailed settlement, a legal settlement. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail, but I think where I think we need to go is to have clear accountability and clear benchmarks. I think some of the things we talked about last week, where we put very tangible goals that we want timelines attached to, we want benchmarks attached to. I've always believed in that approach. That's the approach we've taken with other federal monitorships, by the way. So that's the kind of thing I think would build a confidence. We're obviously a ways from getting down to what all those specifics would be, but that's the nature of it.
Mr. Mayor, the initiatives that you've been unrolling and unveiling the last couple of weeks, which ones do you think hold the most promise to convince HUD to help the people?
Again, while respecting that I don't want to speak for the Secretary or HUD, I think it's fair to say that it was very meaningful for HUD to see that there's a new labor deal and that there's going to be 7-day-a-week maintenance service now at NYCHA. That's very important. I think also the strong commitment to the RAD program, which is something clearly this Secretary believes in. And the fact that we are ready to approach it on a historic level. You're talking about 62,000 apartments. That is a scale far beyond anything that's done previously with it. But our level of commitment to it, I think, is important to him and to people at HUD.
Visit this afternoon, and did he express to you any concerns about the things that he saw, or what was his takeaway?
Again, I'm not going to. I don't want to quote him. I can only very broadly characterize. I think it was important to him personally to have gone to the biggest public housing development in all of America. And he certainly understood that a lot has changed there in the last few years. We talked about the new roofs. That was, I'll be broad and say he's a doctor also. He understands, we talked about the mold issue as a health issue. He understood the full impact of 67 new roofs. So I won't quote him on, you can ask him about what he liked, what he might have had concerns about, but he certainly knew that this was a housing development beyond compare, and he understood we had invested a lot to try and improve it.
Mr. Mayor, how valuable...
Can you give us a sense, a ballpark for the timeline that you're thinking about here?
On a settlement?
Yeah.
I agree with, in fact, I put forward the original notion that we could do this by the end of January. I think that's a reasonable time frame. But what there has to be a common commitment on, I want to thank the members of Congress, they were all clear about this, realistic and attainable goals. If the federal government says at this moment they will not be able to put in additional resources, then we know exactly the resources that we have, and we want to come up with a set of realistic and attainable goals that are fundamentally going to improve lives. If they come back and they say, hey, we can find you some more resources, then we want to expand on those goals in every way possible. But I think there is a real atmosphere in the room of we don't want things that are vague. We want specific things, and we don't want things that are just pie in the sky. We want things that can actually get done. Yes, Julia.
How valuable was a face-to-face meeting, and do you plan on another one, or do you think that's a possibility?
I think it's very valuable. I think, look, we're all human beings, and it's clear that he holds the outcome in his hands, and it's also clear that he wants a dialogue, he wants a positive resolution. He has gone out of his way to say local control is the best option. He said that in several conversations, he reiterated again today. That's a powerful statement to me, that he wants to see us find the common ground. The personal meetings and the personal phone calls have created a real ability to communicate. And I think it's going to help us to find common ground. And I said to the Secretary, I think we're going to have to keep talking to get this all worked through, and he said, I welcome that. So I think that was very positive. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been watching a news conference by Mayor de Blasio talking about the meeting he had with the U.S. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Dr. Ben Carson, talking about how to solve the chronic issues, both physically and as well as just the living conditions as far as people's health, how things are taken care of. The mayor had with him 3 Democratic congressional members, all seemed pretty positive that the outcome of this meeting was positive, because we know that Dr. Carson had said if NYCHA does not come up with a solution, it could be taken over by the federal government. A lot of steps to go, but everyone seemed upbeat and encouraged by the meeting. We know that the mayor recently announced a $24 billion 10-year overhaul of the properties run by NYCHA, and some plans on how to fix this, and also adding manpower on how to fix things on a daily basis. The one thing we did not hear and we have not heard yet is from Dr. Carson, who is, or if I understood it correctly, already has visited a NYCHA housing unit and discussing some of the health issues like mold. So we'll wait to hear what Dr. Carson says and see what happens next. Make sure you stay with CBS in New York for continuing coverage of this story important to 400,000 residents in our city. You can also find extended coverage of the NYCHA housing problems at cbsnewyork.com.